Hello and welcome into my divisional round reaction and breakdown. Obviously, my name is Cody. I am the host of Sports Talk on a Budget podcast that comes down that I drop on a weekly basis. This isn't a part of the podcast. It's just going to be my reaction to the divisional round. Let's go ahead. I'm going to look at each game, break down what I saw, and react to what I saw from each game. Let's go ahead and dive into the first game. And that was obviously the Jacksonville Jaguars on the road at the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Chiefs winning that game 27-20. Obviously, the big storyline is the high ankle sprain that Patrick Mahomes suffered in that game. Suffered that in the second quarter of the game. Was out for the second quarter, basically for the rest of the second quarter. Came back into the game in the second half. Played well in the second half. Obviously, was limited. You could see him even limping on long handoff plays, but still was very effective. Still was able to do probably about 70, maybe 60% of what Patrick Mahomes is, but very effective and kind of a very valiant effort there by Patrick Mahomes. But the storyline for this game outside of Mahomes to me was the Jacksonville Jaguars had zero answer for Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce had 14 receptions, 98 yards, and two touchdowns. And every time he seemed to catch the ball, he was wide open, was absolutely wide open. And the Jacksonville Jaguars had no game plan for him, have no way to stop him. They were playing zone, they were playing man. You can't play zone against Travis Kelce. He's just going to find the soft spot in the hole in the zone, turn around, and Patrick Mahomes is going to put it on him because they have that kind of connection. And it's hard to play man against Travis Kelce unless you have someone that is capable of covering a guy like Travis Kelce because obviously he's too big for a defensive back and he's too fast for a linebacker. Devin Lloyd, their rookie out of Utah, they thought might be able to have the kind of skill set to guard Travis Kelce. That was obviously not the case. He absolutely dominated. But another big storyline, I think that kind of the turning point outside of the Mahomes injury in this game was that 98-yard touchdown drive that was orchestrated by Chad Henne. Chad Henne came off the bench, obviously with Patrick Mahomes as the Chiefs quarterback. You never see Chad Henne. There's probably a lot of people that didn't think Chad Henne was still playing in the league when he came off the bench for Patrick Mahomes when he had that injury. Chad Henne, he gets the ball on his own 2 yard line, goes down the field. Great orchestrated plays by Andy Reid to make easy throws for Chad Henne. But Chad Henne made good throws, a 3rd and 3 throw to Juju Smith-Schuster that converted the third down, moved the chains. That was huge. Chad Henne, that was a huge drive that made it a. They were up by 3 on their own 2 yard line with their backup 37-year-old quarterback in the game. That could have went a lot of different ways. They went down the field, get the touchdown, go up 10, and kind of put a stranglehold, not exactly a big stranglehold, but put a pretty good stranglehold on the game at that point that the Jacksonville Jaguars were able to overcome. They were able to get the game within one possession, but they were able to overcome to tie the game, to obviously take the lead, and that 98-yard drive was basically the key there. But if you look at the Kansas City Chiefs and going forward a little bit, that defense needs to be concerned. They gave up 6 yards per play against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and you can't give that up. Obviously, they won't be able to get away with giving that up to Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. And if you want to be uh, a team of this magnitude, a team that you think is going to compete for Super Bowl year in and year out, which they do, you can't be giving up 6 yards per play to a team like Jacksonville, a good, developing young team that should be around for the years to come. But in this day and age, or at this time right now, you shouldn't be giving up 6 yards per play to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Hats off to the Jaguars. They played their absolute ass off, but they had opportunities here. Obviously, you had Patrick Mahomes, who I believe is the best quarterback in the league. You had him at probably 60% of his powers. He wasn't able to move the pocket. One of the big keys for Patrick Mahomes and one of the things that makes him special and makes him great is his ability to move within the pocket. His ability to extend the play, to make guys miss within the pocket, and then throw the ball downfield to a Kelce, to a Juju Smith, to a Valdez Scantling. That is what makes Patrick Mahomes great, and he wasn't able to do that for basically half the game, even more. Basically, almost 2/3 of the game, he wasn't able to have that kind of impact on the game, and Jacksonville just wasn't able to capitalize. weren't able to get stops against a Chiefs offense, which was obviously limited without Patrick Mahomes and what he can do and the physical talents that he has. So, like I said, hats off to Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence for getting the Jacksonville Jaguars to the divisional round. Pretty much nobody really had that going into the season and for most of the season, but you had your opportunity to take over this game, especially with the injury to Patrick Mahomes, and maybe be playing for a shot to go to the Super Bowl this weekend, and you didn't capitalize on that. And yes, you can't be disappointed by the season because you exceeded expectations by a lot, but still there was a lot left to be had if you're a Jacksonville Jaguars fan. And then we'll move to the night game. Not much to talk about this night game. The Eagles absolutely obliterated the Giants 38-7, and it probably could have been 45-7 or maybe even more. It was just total domination, total mismatch. Going in this game, if you watched my podcast last week, I didn't think that the Eagles would dominate the Giants, but I didn't see a path to victory for the Giants. The biggest weakness for the Giants has been their rush defense. They're ranked 27th in the league in rush defense and stopping the rush, and that is the strength. That is the absolute strength of the um, the Philadelphia Eagles offense. And if you look at it, it's not just Miles Sanders, it's not just Jalen Hurts, it's not just Kenneth Gainwell. It's a collective of all of them, and they all ran very well on the Giants. They all had very good games. They all had, I think, Gainwell and Miles Sanders had plus 70 yards on the ground, and Jalen Hurts ran when he needed to, had a rushing touchdown, picked up big yards on the ground when he needed to, and that I knew was going to be the Achilles heel for the Giants. And then obviously basically from the get-go. Boom, touchdown, boom, touchdown. It was 14-0 in the blink of an eye, and the Eagles had no problem just imposing their will on the New York Giants. The Giants had no answer for the passing game either, whether that was Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert. The Eagles were able to do whatever they wanted to do on the offensive side. And then you flip over to the defensive side. They turned Daniel Jones back into the Daniel Jones pre-Brian Daboll. They turned Daniel Jones, like I said, into the Daniel Jones that we all came to know before Brian Daboll was hired to be the head coach there. He had 11 QBR, a couple of turnovers. He was just super ineffective. Kind of makes you think, how bad is that Minnesota Vikings defense? Because he torched them last week and threw for 300 plus yards and ran for 78 yards, and he couldn't do anything, whether it was running, passing, whatever. He couldn't do anything against this Philadelphia defense. So like I said, it does make you think a little bit, how bad was that Minnesota defense? But Daniel Jones, obviously, we'll see what the Giants do going forward. I pretty much thought that this was his ceiling. I don't think you can get any further than the divisional round. I didn't really think you can get further than the wild card round with Daniel Jones as your quarterback. This was his absolute ceiling here, and the Giants had reached their absolute ceiling. They do not have a number one wide receiver. Their offense is basically, okay, let's lean on Saquon Barkley, and then maybe that'll open up the passing game a little bit, and Daniel Jones and some of these unsung wide receivers can get something going. That was never going to be the case. Their defense had no shot in this game from the get-go. Their defense, I thought, their pass defense could maybe slow down Jalen Hurts and those wide receivers for the Eagles and maybe make the Eagles win the game on the ground. That wasn't the case. The Eagles won the game on the ground. They won the game in the air. They did whatever they wanted to do this entire game, both in the air and on the ground and on the defensive side. Total mismatch here. And yeah, Philadelphia's defense sacked Daniel Jones 5 times. They hit him another 4 or 5 times at least. Hurries all over the place. They were just all over Daniel Jones, in his face. He had no chance the entire game. And it was complete domination from the get-go for the Philadelphia Eagles, and I like their chances a lot going into this weekend hosting the 49ers. I'll get to that later in the week with my my championship breakdown picks. But as of right now, I think this Philadelphia Eagles team is primed to make a deep run in this playoffs. And then we'll go to the Sunday games. And obviously, the first game was the AFC divisional round game, and that was the Bengals at the Bills. And the Bengals beat the Bills 27-10. And just like the game we just talked about, the Eagles and Giants, it didn't even feel that close. I thought the Bengals probably could have put 30, 35 on there. I thought that Jamar Chase touchdown was a touchdown, so it would have been at least 31-10. But this was another game that you could tell right away who the better team was. And just like how the Philadelphia Eagles jumped out to a 14-0 lead on the Giants in a blink of an eye, that is exactly what the Cincinnati Bengals did to the Bills. They jumped out to a 14-0 lead. First 2 possessions, boom, right down the field, 70-plus yard drives, boom, right down the field, touchdown, Jamar Chase, touchdown, Hayden Hurst. They were just unbelievable. The Bengals played an absolutely flawless game in the first half, and pretty much a flawless game for the entire game. Joe Burrow was great. And the big storyline coming into this game for the Cincinnati Bengals was that kind of patchwork offensive line. They had 3 backups starting, their center, their guard, and their tackle. The whole right side of the offensive line was basically backups. That had no effect at all. Joe Burrow was only sacked once. He was only hit 3 times, and one of the times he was hit was on that touchdown pass to Jamar Chase, and he was hit on that play, but still stood in there and made the throw to Jamar Chase, actually stepped up in the pocket and made that throw to Jamar Chase for a touchdown. That offensive line was not that, it wasn't a factor at all. They ran for 178 yards. Um, Joe Mixon had 105. P. Ryan had a good game on the ground. Joe Burrow was able to get out and scramble and get some yards on the ground. They absolutely dominated the Bills on the offensive line there and on the defensive line. They were in Josh Allen's face all day. He was sacked 3 to 4 times. He was hurried a couple of times. Maybe a fumble there with that play by Von Bell that ended up being called an incomplete pass. But either way, the Bengals were sending corners, they were sending safeties on blitzes, they were disrupting Josh Allen, and that was kind of what I thought could be a key in this game is disrupting Josh Allen, making him uncomfortable because at the end of the day, the Bills offense is Josh Allen go be a superhero or bust. That is how they run their offense. They need Josh Allen to be basically a superhero every game against good teams like Cincinnati and like Kansas City and other teams like that. And if he's not, they lose that game or it gets very close like their wild card round game against the Miami Dolphins, where he wasn't superhuman, but they were able to kind of sneak by because they were playing an inferior team. Well, obviously this weekend they were not playing an inferior team. The Cincinnati Bengals were the better team, and they were the better team from the get go. They were absolutely the better team from the get go. Kind of flip over to just talk about the Bills a little bit. This team was the Super Bowl favorite coming into the season. Everybody had them as their Super Bowl pick. Even I had them as my Super Bowl pick. They were supposed to be a team that was going to finally get over the hump this year and get into the Super Bowl and potentially win a Super Bowl. Josh Allen was finally going to be a top level MVP candidate and maybe even win the MVP. He was the betting favorite for the MVP coming in the season. And they didn't really take a step forward at all. In fact, they took a step back, in my opinion, because this year you thought that they were going to be the team this year, and the entire year it was evident basically after like week 4, week 5, that their offensive identity was basically Josh Allen or bust. They have never been able to develop a consistent running game outside of Josh Allen. Josh Allen has led this team the last 2 years in rushing. You cannot have your quarterback lead your team in rushing unless it's like Lamar Jackson, and that offense is built around Lamar Jackson and his running ability. But Josh Allen is a pass first quarterback that has the capability to run and make plays with his legs, but he should not be leading your team in rushing yards every single year. And that has been the case the last 2 years. And on the defensive side, once Von Miller went down, they had no answer and no ability to get consistent pressure on quarterbacks. And so when you're playing a quarterback like Joe Burrow, or if they would have advanced and played Patrick Mahomes, and you're not getting any pressure on them, and they can just stand in the pocket and pick you apart, that is exactly what they're going to do, and that is exactly what Joe Burrow did. He picked them apart. He was 9 for 9 on those first 2 touchdown drives, and obviously 2 touchdown passes, and basically put this game on ice on those first 2 drives. Yes, the Buffalo Bills did score a touchdown to make it 14-7, but no one really thought that they were in control in this game at any point. And once they made it 14-7, the Bengals went right down the field and got at least a field goal. And I thought it should have been a touchdown. I thought that Jamar Chase play in the end zone was a touchdown. God knows what a catch in today's NFL is, to be honest, but I thought that was a touchdown. They call it incomplete pass because he didn't, complete the catch, even though Milano got in there after Chase had 3 feet down. He got 3 feet down, then goes to the ground. Milano goes in there and moves the ball a little bit after he's already got 3 feet down and went out of bounds, and somehow that's not a catch. That is a conversation for another day. I won't get into that more because the definition of a catch in the NFL these days, I don't even know what that is. I don't think most refs can tell you what the definition of a catch is in the NFL in these days. But either way, as soon as the Bills threatened the Bengals put that to bed and went down and got points, made it a 10-point lead. And even in the second half when it was 17-10, the Bengals went right down and got a touchdown, made it 24-10, and basically put this game on ice, both on the offensive side and the defensive side, by forcing Josh Allen out of his game and making him uncomfortable. And then basically they were able to do whatever they wanted in this game on offense. So hats off to Cincinnati. I give them a great chance to go into Kansas City, especially with a high ankle sprain to Patrick Mahomes, and get a victory this Sunday. But obviously I will break that down more later in the week with my with my championship weekend breakdown. And then the fourth and final game of the weekend, and that's back to the NFC, and that is the 49ers hosting the Dallas Cowboys, and the 49ers winning that game 19-12. We're going to talk about the Cowboys first, and we're going to talk about their quarterback, Dak Prescott, first. Because the Cowboys, especially in the first half, I thought were the better team. They looked like the better team on the field. They were playing like the better team on the field, except for one position, and that was the quarterback position, and that was Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott in the first half, that first interception, you throw it on your own 20, you set up the San Francisco 49ers for points right there, and they got a field goal. So you give the 49ers points right away with that first interception. Then your second interception, you're close to the red zone. You're on the fringe of the red zone. I know Maher had his issues, but those were mostly with extra points. He actually knocked down both the field goals that he was asked to kick in this game. So the field goals weren't an issue. And they were in field goal range for Maher. You throw it into double coverage. You try to force it into CeeDee Lamb. It could have been picked by both the guys that were guarding CeeDee Lamb. It was actually bounced off of, I think, Jimmy Ward and then into the hands of, what was it, Fred Warner. I don't remember exactly who it was, the interception, but it bounced off one 49ers defender and into the hand of the other 49ers defender. Those guys were the guys that were bracketing basically CeeDee Lamb on that play. You cannot try to force it in there. And so you put points on the board for San Francisco on that first interception, and you take points off the board for your own team on the next interception, and the 49ers went down the field and got 3 more points to end the half to make it 9-6. So you basically gave them 6 points with those 2 interceptions, and you took at least 3 points off the board with the second interception. So that's potentially a 9-point swing. You cannot have that kind of performance for as much as we talked about Dak Prescott and how awesome and how great he was in the game on Monday night against Tampa Bay, and he was. He was unbelievable. He was great against Tampa Bay on Monday night in the wild card round, but San Francisco's not Tampa Bay. San Francisco is a vastly superior team, a much better team to Tampa Bay, and they showed it, and their defense showed it, and they knew that they could force Dak Prescott, who has been very turnover prone this year, led the league in turnovers, even though he missed 5 games due to injuries, or led the league in interceptions, even though he missed 5 games due to injury, which is just unbelievable. They knew he was in interception prone. They knew if they just stayed in their lanes, stayed in their gaps, played sound football on the defensive side, they could force Dak Prescott into a couple of interceptions. That's exactly what they did, and then they capitalized on those. They didn't get in the end zone on those interceptions, but they got 6 points, and they kept the Cowboys out of the end zone and out of getting any kind of points, at least on that second drive and maybe even potentially on that first drive. And that's exactly what the San Francisco 49ers do. They're going to make you make those mistakes. They're not going to make the mistakes. They're going to capitalize on it, and that's what turns into victories for them. And to stay with the Cowboys, too, obviously the injury to Tony Pollard in the second quarter basically really hurt this Cowboys team, made them very one-dimensional because Ezekiel Elliott is basically a shell of what he once was and the guy who was deserving of the contract that he got, even though I thought it was kind of early. But he's a shell of his former self, and once Tony Pollard went down, who was clearly their number one running back right now, Ezekiel Elliott wasn't able to kind of pick up the slack and be that guy that they thought he could be, the guy that's making $20+ million a year as a running back. He was definitely not that guy, and it was evident. And not only is Tony Pollard their best running back at pure running the ball, he is probably their second best receiving threat, maybe their third best receiving threat behind CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz. But you can argue that he's their second best receiving threat, just behind CeeDee Lamb. So that killed him in that respect as well. And he's kind of that security blanket along with Dalton Schultz for Dak Prescott. When Dak Prescott gets in a bind, he can't find CeeDee Lamb, he can't find another wide receiver, whether that's Michael Gallup or Noah Brown downfield. He's going to look for the check down to potentially Tony Pollard or obviously Dalton Schultz. With Tony Pollard not being there, and his explosiveness really did hurt the Cowboys offense in the second half and late in that second quarter as well. So that was another big blow for the Dallas Cowboys. But just to look at the 49ers didn't do anything special. They just played sound football and didn't make mistakes. Brock Purdy didn't have any touchdown passes. He threw for a little over 200 yards, was somewhat efficient in throwing the ball. They didn't run the ball great. They kind of ended the game running the ball well, but they only had 24 rushing yards in the first half. They ended the game kind of pounding and getting to that Dallas defensive line and kind of getting them tired. And so you could see that they were able to wear down that Dallas defensive front and that Dallas defense. And that's when they were handing the ball off to Elijah Mitchell and Christian McCaffrey and kind of just putting the game away. So able to do that. But like I said, at the end of the day, Kittle had 5 receptions for 96 yards. He played a pretty good game, but the 49ers didn't do anything special. Like I said, they just didn't make mistakes, and they were there, and they capitalized on the mistakes that Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys made, and that's how they were able to win the game. Don't think that recipe will work on the road in Philadelphia. They're going to have to be better than what they were this Sunday. But either way, they're in the NFC Championship game. Obviously, our matchups are going to be the Cincinnati Bengals at the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers at the Philadelphia Eagles. Can't wait for that. Please tune in. It will either be Wednesday or Friday will be my AFC Championship breakdown. Thank you for listening and have a great day.